Hey everybody, this is another episode of Friday Night Movies. I'm Matt and I'm here along with
John.
Now John, today we're talking about a movie that's very near and dear to your heart that I think in 2020 only a half dozen people may know about or remember it. But that's not a knock on the movie because more people should remember it. And
You know what it is?
it's Universal Soldier. In case people aren't looking at the title of this, for some you blindly clicked onto this.
You're very trusting.
You're very trusting. You were just like
This could have been something gross like bugs, and you would never have known.
Do you mean like Bugs the movie, or just bugs in general?
It's just insects, and whatever's more unsettling to you in that moment, or the bunny. I don't know. I don't know how you fly.
Oh my god. Okay, so now you were gonna say something presumably insightful.
Yes, because I really don't make any promises, but no. Yeah, so the reason that I know you had said that it seems like kind of a niche movie, even though it seems like the kind of thing that would be well known. I feel like the Jean-Claude Van Damme sphere is kind of like that, where he was just in a lot of the action movies you remember, but you probably kind of lumped it into like a generic file somewhere, along with like Rambo and Die Hard and things like that. I feel like there's that over.
So two things. One, yeah, I did say that to you off camera or off podcast like a few days back when we were supposed to do this, but we didn't have the opportunity to. And something that's also funny as well is that you call it the Van Damme sphere as if there's like a entire cinematic universe, like they all kind of like come together in a weird way. But it's really just you Mandela affecting / memory. Like they're all congealing into one Van Damme film.
Yes. Yes, that completely tracks.
Now, I feel like you know more about Van Damme's history than I do. Is this towards the end of his hotshot action hero filmography, or is this peak? Is this at the beginning?
It's hard to. I mean, that's hard to judge because it's really. I feel in a lot of ways subjective. Like when an actor or when somebody's career has its peak, it's kind of debatable. But it was in 1992, so I want to say that it was at least probably in the heyday of his popularity. If I had to point to the period of time in which he was most prominent in popular culture, I think the early to mid 90s would have been it. So yeah, okay. I think this was golden age Van Damme. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So the reason why I say peak, I'm not saying it in a negative sense, but I bring it up because this movie came out in 92. I'm going to say at least 3 years later than anyone who watched this movie thought it came out. And I'm talking about at the time in theaters. People who saw this in 1992 in theaters were like, what year is it? Because this has quintessential 80s action movie written all over it. So the fact that it came out in 92 is kind of funny. And that's why I wanted to see when this lined up with both Van Damme's timeline and also with Dolph Lundgren's, who, to me, it seems like being, post Ivan Drago, this is a little bit after his hits, at least in the Rocky franchise. And I only bring this up because bringing these two together seems like it makes sense, but I wanted to see if it made sense because they've both been in the game for a while and they both had recognition, or if, Van Damme was the spunky young, action star. I know he was also he was in Street Fighter, right?
Yeah, so this was shortly before Street Fighter, because Street Fighter was 94. He was a fairly seasoned action film star at this point, and martial arts film star, because he had. I would have to check. It's been a little while since I checked, but I know like Bloodsport was in the late 80s, I think.
Okay,
so like
he was in Bloodsport.
If I remember. Yeah, so this was really more action movie Van Damme. Early Van Damme, he definitely had his share of action movies, but it was more martial arts focused.
Right, I'm lumping the two together, but yes, you are correct. Yes, it's transitioned from kung fu, not really kung fu, but kung fu into now I'm just doing what some would consider generic action.
Right, but it's more traditional action with explosions and guns and things like that. So
Right.
this was Van Damme at the height, or I would say in probably the most prominent time of him as an action star. This was when he was a property as an action star.
I remember friends going nuts over him at one point. I'm pretty sure Monica even mentions like meeting Van Damme on set, and they see Van Damme on set. I don't know if you were a fan of Friends back in the day, John.
I've never seen it in a single episode.
Really? Huh.
Yeah.
That's
Don't not really my thing. Like honestly, like I just it's
Seinfeld,
not the type of show that I usually go for. No Seinfeld either.
Oh, okay, yeah. No, for me, I wasn't a Seinfeld guy, but my mom watched Friends, so I just kind of got inducted. And then with all those like Nick at Night reruns, no Nick at Night reruns of Universal Soldier. But a Friends that introduced me to Van Damme, at least by name. That's kind of funny. Although I did see, it's funny, I came to you with this. So I had never heard of the Universal Soldier franchise, maybe a little bit like on YouTube, like on a list or something. And because of that, when I did hear about it through that way, I thought, oh, this series sounds wacky. I didn't know too much about the initial film. Then I saw half of it starting from the freezer scene. Or, I'm sorry, the diner into the freezer scene. And I saw that on the Rey Network, which is one of my favorite networks, honest to God, that I feel like if I had a TV network, that would be Rey. And I've talked to you about this, John. Some longtime fans have heard me rant about this network. We are not being sponsored. It's a television network, everyone. For anyone out there that's about to be upset. But no, seriously, John, this network is insane. They have Godzilla marathons during Christmas. They play kung fu, like 70s kung fu dubbed movies throughout the year. They have Lucha Underground, a specifically Mexican, Hispanic style, Lucha Libre style wrestling promotion. Which, as a Hispanic man, I'm just consistently drawn to this. They have Quantum Leap marathons. They also have some Star Trek marathons every now and again. You and I do Star Trek Thursdays. They'll have, like, even though it's shows that I haven't seen, but like Voyager or Deep Space Nine, Battlestar Galactica, Xena Warrior Princess. Stuff that, like, I'm not even, like, the biggest fan of, but I'll flip on. I'll be like, yeah, sure. It's crazy, John, the amount of stuff they have on this network that just feels like it's tailored to me personally.
Yeah, they're either appealing to a very specific, this specific subset of nerdy demographic, or it's just a good combination. It almost reminds me of how Spike. It almost reminds me of like how Spike TV was in the day, or I think it was originally intended to be like a man network, but then they ended up having just like nerdy stuff on it, like Star Trek and.
Yeah, oh my God. I remember when Spike, maybe it still does. I think it's still called Spike, right? I remember they have those Cops reruns all day.
Yeah, yep.
All fucking day.
Or is that True TV?
No. It was Spike. I mean, I'm not saying True TV doesn't have that either, but Spike definitely had it. You know what they should have done? They should have done like Spike. They should have done like 10 reruns of Cops and then sneak in one episode of X-Files. But the Cops crossover.
Oh, no.
Just sneak in one.
Fox did both, so they could have a crossover. I never actually saw that.
Oh, it was actually really good. It's actually a really good episode. Just a random side note. It's really... No, I don't think El Rey has X-Files. That's BBC America. But
yeah.
But seriously though, I think it's because Robert Rodriguez actually runs El Rey, and he did he's done a lot of different awesome movies. So I feel like it's just there's a kinship there.
Absolutely.
But back to Universal Soldier, yeah, I jumped in the middle of it and I was like, whoa. And then I messaged you, as I do with many an 80s things, because I thought it was 80s at the time. And I was like, John, have you seen this? This seems up your alley. And then all of a sudden you're like, up my alley. You brought Van Damme up. Now I have to tell you about...
I have to see you've activated me on something, so...
Yeah.
Pack a lunch.
So you really enjoyed this movie back in the day. You're a bit older than I am. Not too much, but every time I bring it up, John's like, ugh.
Nah, no, I'm slightly seasoned.
It's when I get it wrong. It's when I'm like, oh, it's been 8 years and a month. You're like, hey,
so John,
8 years and a day.
So, John, the scenes in Vietnam, did those speak to you because you were in Vietnam? But
you were in your 30s in 1969.
Which we putting in that perspective, I look great right now. I look absolutely immaculate.
You do. No one can see, but you do.
To tell you the truth, like so much else, though, I didn't get into Van Damme with any regularity until much later in the game. Like I'm talking like within the past 10 years is when I started like following his movies really well past the point where he was really in. Like he wasn't like a blockbuster name anymore.
Oh, that's interesting.
Like I said, yeah, so I didn't see these movies. I mean, I was aware of these movies when they came out, but I didn't. In most cases, except for the Street Fighter movie, because like I said, I asked my parents to take me to that. That was on New Year's Day. Because we used to go out to the movies every New Year's Day.
Oh, that's
so like
nice.
the Christmas that came out, I was like, yeah, we got to see Street Fighter. So I really wasn't until I was well into my adulthood, quote unquote, that I got into his stuff. Because like I said, I didn't really watch a lot of like action. I mean, I watched some action movies when I was a kid, but like it wasn't like I would follow a lot of them.
Yeah, but that still throws me off because I know Van Damme isn't like the nerdiest in the bunch, and this isn't the nerdiest film in the bunch, but still though, when you were like, there's certain 80s, and again, I know not 80s, 92, but certain 80s, you can't tell me though this was not conceived in 88, 89.
This was 80s in spirit. Like I said, the mixture of the goofiness and the ultra violence.
Yes.
Relatively speaking, really nothing compared to
the
what we
sci-fi.
Like, yeah, and really that the collision of the sci-fi elements and things like that was very an over the top 80s style that I think continued well into the 90s with action movies with that like over the top camp. Especially Dolph Lundgren's little like mannerisms, like he throws that grenade and we think it blows the pretty lady reporter up, and he does a little like slow motion fist pump, like he and that bit where he's like, it's empty. Like it really just it's very 80s in spirit, is what I'm saying.
Yes. But what I wanted to say though is that being 80s in spirit, when I think of something that's either 80s or 80s in spirit, I think John. And usually I get you though. I'm like, John, this came out in the 80s, and you're like, yes, Matt, this film did come out in the 80s, and I'm like, yeah, and you're like, I saw it at one point, got him. So I assumed, so the way you spoke about this, you were a little, there was some fervor there. I thought you actually had seen this in 92 or around that time. But I didn't realize you saw it within the last, 10 years or so. That's interesting.
Yeah, I do that with a lot of stuff, is I don't get into it until long after it's had its day. I really heavily got into the band Nirvana, which is one of my favorite bands. Almost 2010. 2010.
Oh my god! Oh no,
downloading
John.
their disc.
No, you and I want to say that's like almost yesterday. That's 10 years ago to the date.
That's 10 years ago. So yeah, so I only got into Nirvana 10 years ago. But so I get into things long after they're hyper relevant. Because the thing is, it's really only in this stage of my life that I'm really getting into things while they're popular. Because it used to be that I would avoid anything that everybody else was talking about. Even when I was a little kid, I don't know what I was trying to prove. But I wasn't, I didn't really sink my teeth into like the trends.
Yeah. I want to call you weird, but that happens to me as well. Not on purpose. It's just like people are talking about something, and like sometimes I have the chance to watch it, sometimes I don't. It's really more now, do I have the chance to watch it live while everyone else is talking about it? But what I found interesting with this film, just jumping back to the movie, is how at the time a lot of critics were panning it, and I found that so interesting because I'm not going to sit here and say this is like Emmy award winning or Oscar nominated or anything like that. Should say Oscars. Yeah. I'm not saying that, but I do think that some of its anti-war and PTSD themes are ones that I found very interesting at the time because, I mean, the only war that I see in pop culture, like in movies now trying to lambast, the only war is Nam. That's become like the only war I feel like as Americans in film we can actually like lampoon and discuss and shit on. But you're not even going to have a movie nowadays, I would argue. And this is not one of those, oh, movies nowadays don't want to do this. But I'm just, being quite honest here. I don't feel like a movie nowadays would criticize the Iraq War.
No, I mean, well,
the way that this film is criticizing Nam with their soldiers coming back with PTSD. Now, I'm not saying this is the only movie that did that at the time.
No, definitely not. Rambo.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to get at, though. It's interesting that you could argue this is just the poor man's Rambo, if you will, but I feel like both can exist. One being Rambo, this one being having some weird sci-fi interesting elements to it. I think that both can exist. I would argue, even though I haven't seen all of or if ever have seen Rambo, I know I've seen clips and bits. I would argue that Rambo maybe did it a bit less clunkily than this did.
Well, Rambo was trying to be a different movie. I mean, the themes of veterans having PTSD and veterans being used and discarded by the government, that's definitely a strong theme in both of them. But I think beyond that, they're two different types of movie. At least the first Rambo, like I said, I can't really speak to the other one.
Oh yeah, no. Rambo got weird, dude. That I know.
But First Blood at least was about him. It was about one guy's journey, and it was a little bit more grounded and a little bit more realistic. I mean, I know you don't really think realism with Rambo when he's shooting endless magazines and surviving like nuclear explosions or what have you, but it doesn't have the sci-fi. It's a little more grounded in like the time period, whereas Unisol was like more, like you said, had more of a sci-fi bent to it. And this was around the time too, like I said, the 80s, the 90s both, was that it was around that time that people were comfortable talking about Vietnam. That they were comfortable having movies about it. And that's why I think, like I said, this I'm just piecing together what I remember what my dad told me, but so feel free to fact check. But I think one of the first movies about Vietnam that like dealt with it was, I think, Apocalypse Now or Full Metal Jacket. But until then, it was a sore subject,
of course,
for any number of obvious reasons.
Right. But it's just interesting that now it seems like that's the only war that can be poked and prodded at. It seems like any war over the last 30 years, and I hate to say that 90s is 30 years now, so kill me, but the last 30 years, it's still hush-hush. Whereas, to be fair, again, 69 in the 80s, that's still around the 20-year point. But no, you had a lot of movies, including this one, kind of lambasting that war, and even the reason why I say only in pop culture today, John, I don't know if you've seen Kong Skull Island.
No, I didn't check that one out.
You definitely should. It's so good, and B, it actually takes place in the 70s. So they're cool. Shitting on like hyper masculinity and toxic masculinity, and also the war, specifically in this case Nam. So that movie, you can have them blast Nam, understandably so. But then, and I know it's been 12 years, God, kill me. But the first Transformers movie, they actually worked hand in hand with the U.S. military and the way that they showed the military and the way that they had Transformers in, I believe it was in Iraq at the time. No, but it's interesting, John. They actually got tax credits so that they could, and they were also able to use the tanks. So they helped the movie, the U.S. military helped the movie get made because they painted them in a good light and they worked with them hand in hand. And
the attitudes towards war and the attitudes toward the military are constantly fluctuating.
Of course,
and at the time, the first Transformers movie, if I remember correctly, and I'm talking the Michael Bay verse, I'm not the 86. To me, the 86 animated movie is the first and in truth the only movie, but that's a whole other podcast.
Well,
but anyway,
John, if you're a fan of the series, of course you could always come on. We could talk about it for Anna Saturday. I would love to.
But 2007, I think, was when the first Bay movie came out, and that was during the war. That was when the war in Iraq, I said, the war on terror was still in full swing. We were still only, you said, we were less than a decade off of 9/11.
That's fair. And I just feel like even now, it's funny though, later Transformers movies, they did stop getting the funding, I think because they were like, well, we kind of have to be in some kind of conflict. And I think they were like, well, then we're out. So I'm pretty sure eventually it started becoming like, it wasn't the military, but it was like military-esque organizations. Yeah. So I didn't really keep up with the later Transformers movies, but it's just interesting to see that in a movie like this, that you could say that it's maybe because it came out in '92. It was the action movies that were like this weren't so much in vogue anymore. But I think looking at it now in retrospect, it definitely deserves at the very least a cult following, and it does seem like Universal Soldier. I'm talking about Universal Soldier here, not the first Transformers movie. It seems like it really kind of does have that cult following now, and funnily enough, it even got new sequels in like 2012. And
it's been running for a long time. Anything after the first movie was just direct to video, like direct home video, and that was it. This is really...
Yes and no. So I mean, you're right in that the one in 2009 and the one in 2012, I don't believe they went to... No. Actually, it was released in theaters.
Oh, it was. Because like I said, my knowledge of the series is basically limited to the first one. I don't really know anything about the later ones, except I do know that, like, you know, Van Damme's character, like, he switches, like, he becomes the bad guy, basically, in the later
perhaps
installments.
But what I do enjoy is that yes, you are correct. Like, first of all, I enjoy that you don't know this, so that when we do talk about this, you'll be like, yeah, that was bad, or yeah, that was good. So what happened is that they released Universal Soldier 2, The Soldiering, and Universal Soldiers 3, We Would Like Money from This, and they were also known as Brothers in Arms and Unfinished Business, and both of those recast everybody and tried to make them as TV movies so that they could, like, do a potential TV series. So they were meant to be like a pilot, basically.
Oh, and Van Damme wasn't in all of them because they probably couldn't afford it.
Right. Either one of those two. And that's that's basically like RoboCop at one point, right?
Yeah.
But,
well, RoboCop...
What?
Didn't all four RoboCops were in theaters, though?
No. They did a RoboCop like TV series that they then repackaged as movies, or vice versa. There were movies that they repackaged as a TV series.
Oh, I didn't know that. Other than the cartoons, the Saturday morning cartoons.
Oh! Thank you for reminding me. I was about to laugh with you in a very uncomfortable way. Rambo got a Saturday morning cartoon. Did you know
Rambo
that?
and the Force? Yep, Rambo and the Force of Freedom. I used to watch it because it was basically just extra G.I. Joe. It was just G.I. Joe, but another half hour.
Oh my God! I just can't imagine just G.I. Joe. Hey kids, do you know what PTSD is? That's our buddy Rambo.
When you sign your ass away to the government to pay off your student loans, nobody wins.
Like,
so think twice before visiting that recruiter's office. G.I. Joe.
I'm being serious though. Like, I just can't imagine a power hour. Like, just Rambo screaming for hours. Just Optimus like, I don't know what to do about this.
You're obviously going through some shit right now, John.
Yeah.
But you know what it is that
Starscream?
Is
he okay?
Even I feel bad. But so no, Rambo and put it, like, remind me of this, because I think we could fill an entire segment with just Saturday morning versions of R-rated things that had no business being a cartoon. But yeah, they downgraded Rambo to, like, you know, he's okay now. Like, there was no evidence of him being unhinged in the, you know, and I said, not to poke fun PTSD or whatever it might be, you know, whatever the case might be.
But that's the thing. It is a very...
It's the point of the character. The point of the character was his trauma from the war.
Yeah.
And then reducing him to just like an action. He was basically like Duke or General Hawk or you know, Herc Armstrong or whatever generic, like, leader guy from the 80s fighting force you might have.
Yes, and then, of course, you are correct. As the movies go on, because you were mentioning this earlier, you said you don't know what happened in later movies, and I said to you, yeah, as the movies go on, I can't speak about Last Blood, the latest film.
Oh, yeah, I didn't see it. That passed me right by. I forgot that happened.
Yeah, no, same here. So I can't speak to Last Blood. But it does seem as if, from what I've seen and heard from later Rambo films, it did turn the way of the animated show, Question mark. It just became like, oh, hey, how can we fight this villain in a very not generic but a very action starry way to make money off this. And I can't even say this corpse because they had multiple sequels, they had multiple video games, they had comic books, they had the television show, the animated show.
The Rambo NES game, like I said, could fill a whole other segment with that one.
Right.
That was a hot mess. But anyway, yeah, no, absolutely. And the and really with Rambo, I feel like after the first one and probably after the early ones, it was probably a case of the commentary being lost, and then it just being mushed into the generic action soup, where it was just, okay, big guy explode. Because the thing is, people realized that people didn't tune into the first Rambo, and it wasn't so popular because of this, like the insightful, incisive social commentary. It was for the explosions,
right,
and the shooting,
it
and
may
the
have
killing,
snuck up
stuff
on
like
them
that.
actually.
And that's not me. That's not me being like, oh, the uneducated masses. Like, I'm sure everybody recognized the theme, but they weren't like, I can't wait to tune into the next Rambo movie and just really drink in the anti-war.
Well, that's what's that's what's so funny. It seems like a movie just that you really did not need another. You didn't need a sequel to.
Yeah, and then it ended up being, we went from criticizing war to like romanticizing it. So
yes. At least with Universal Soldier, while it still had that mentality of criticizing war, there was enough fun. I don't want to say kooky because it sounds like I'm lambasting it, but I really do enjoy the sci-fi elements. To go, okay, let's go in maybe a different direction for a sequel. Now, you might be thinking, you mentioned earlier, well, yeah, Van Damme wasn't in the later ones, right? I'm going to tell you about something hilarious, John. So those two TV movies, they came out in 98 and October 24th, 98, right? So you're thinking, all right, so then we're done with Van Damme. Mega nope. Universal Soldier: The Return came out in 99 in theaters with Van Damme returning.
But probably not much was made of it, probably, because by then he wasn't I don't think he was as much of a commodity culturally.
But Jern, they made two TV movies to say, yeah, well, you know what, Van Damme, we're going to continue this without you. And they made a sequel, essentially erasing that from canon immediately. This film does not acknowledge anything that happened in those TV movies.
Yeah, probably wipes the slate clean. Once they realized they could get him again, or maybe enough time had passed that he wasn't as expensive. No,
but John, those TV movies came out in 98. This came out in 99. That's a year. So So that's what I'm trying to tell you. They did not know what the fuck they were doing with this not brand.
Yeah. I remember that it kind of lost its way. Yeah. It didn't seem minute to minute that they really knew what they were trying to do. It seemed like they were really trying to make it a thing. I think they kept trying to make it a thing. They were trying to make it a big franchise, and I think it just wasn't happening. And honestly, I don't necessarily know that it has the chops for. Like I said, I enjoyed the first movie as much as the next guy, and probably a little bit more. I don't know that it was let's build a franchise or let's build a brand around this kind of thing.
It would have to become like they were trying really hard. Seriously, it would have to become a 90s cartoon, but by that point, they were past all the 80s G.I. Joe, Rambo, Transformers, My Little Pony. So, I don't know if it could have existed in the very much, 90s sitcom cartoon landscape.
Yeah, and also politically then in the 90s, it was a time of relative peace. There were still a lot of things, like let's say 98, 99. The wheels to the events that will lead up to 9/11 were already well in motion by then. But as a country, our attitudes toward war and our attitudes towards violence, we were kind of in that I'm okay, you're okay. It was
at
that
least
sweet
what
spot
we would show on television for kids, cartoon wise, I think is what you're getting at, right? Like and how that seeps into our entertainment.
Right. So yeah, it was in peacetime, so we weren't getting as much of the macho mentality that we were getting back in the early 90s. In the 80s and well into the early to mid 90s.
Yeah. But then when we get to Universal Soldier Regeneration, that was in 09, and that really looked like it was trying to really revitalized the franchise. And I think with that and with another movie 3 years later, I think it helped because again, this series does not need to be this huge, big budget franchise. Just hey, it seems as if they were trying to bring everything back on course, very much like that newer Halloween movie, which was just a sequel to the first one. This one is just a sequel to the first Universal Soldier, erasing every other one from canon, which again, I've heard it was interesting, but it was done in a way that I thought that, at least me knowing certain spoilers and stuff, that, oh, this movie isn't really, it isn't that serious, especially with the freezer. But then when I saw the freezer scene, I thought, whoa, this movie is not what I expected, because I mean, he's just screaming about still being in the war, and you can tell like that's the interesting thing. Like, people were making fun of, I'm assuming critics were making fun of the fact that Van Damme didn't even have he wasn't even trying to hide his accent. Lundgren was trying, but he wasn't the best at hiding it. I thought it was pretty good most of the time, but I feel like Lundgren actually acted like, yes, it was very much, some of it was a lot of like fun, like Power Rangers type jokes. But when he actually was in that, in that supermarket, just shooting people like left and right, talking about traders and whatnot, he genuinely seemed like, the character genuinely seemed lost and confused.
And then you feel bad for him. You feel the same amount of almost the same pathos for him.
Yeah,
it doesn't excuse going on a killing spree, but it's like, okay, so this isn't just a card carrying, cackling villain. This guy's just out of his head. He doesn't know where he is, and it's probably just as stressing for him because he thinks he's still fighting the war. And like I said, and just in terms of making him menacing, the fact that they gave him like that necklace of ears.
Oh God!
Basically,
yeah.
right in the very beginning, so it kind of throws you in. We have a fairly brutal and a fairly violent scene just to open the whole thing up. So right off the bat the kind of guy that he was in the war, and the guy that if the leash slipped, he could be again.
And it's funny because you talked about how we have at the time this was very violent. Obviously, this got a hard R, I would imagine. But now we get stuff like that all the time, or et cetera, et cetera. But I actually disagree with you. Yes, if you're watching something maybe on Netflix, you'll get because Netflix, they're like, oh, we don't have to have any certain standards.
HBO, any streaming service, HBO Go or whatever.
But I feel like going to a movie nowadays, you would not see, like, they would try harder to be like, could we get rid of the ears? We want to kind of go PG-13, maybe get a bigger demo. Watching this, I don't know if we want the ears thing, John.
No, I'll be John in this case. I don't see a ton of movies anymore. Like, unless it's like a Star Wars movie or a cute animated movie, I don't go to a lot of movies much anymore. Or a Marvel movie.
All right, I'll give you that. But when I see trailers and things like that, they don't really steer in this R direction usually.
Yeah, and in fact, I think you can get away with less in the movies now, and obviously you get away with more on streaming services than in the movies. So the movies, by comparison to the other media that you got going on, is going to be more tame.
Well, it's funny. PG-13 is pushing boundaries. Like, you can technically, under PG-13, you can say fuck once.
You get one. People don't usually don't push that boundary. They're like, let's not take our one fuck. But it's always fun to see memes about, like, this movie could say fuck once. Where would you put it?
But still though, you could get away with it. I'm referring to the fact that companies want to stick in that PG-13 rating to get more people coming in to actually, see the movies, so they could like fund the movie and they can get their money back and more. In this case though, it felt very much like they thought, you know what? We had our tiny budget, 23 million, and they were like, we're just going to put this out. Not that they didn't like it or they hated it, but it felt very much like, look, we're making what we're making. You like it or you don't like it. And it got 80 mil in the box office, and it seemed like that was enough to make them go, damn, this is, and then Jean-Claude was like, yes? No, not you. They were like, damn, this movie's doing very well, and then that's how they got the sequel and everything. Even video games came out. I assumed you would be into the game.
Well, I hadn't realized that Super Turrican was meant to be a game of Unisol, But
yes and no.
the thing though,
I may have flipped it on you, but you keep going and I'll get that info up.
but it's kind of interesting though because I know you said that it did well enough to warrant a sequel and games. It both did and didn't. Because the thing is, I think it was critically panned.
Oh yeah, I mentioned that earlier.
But it did well at the box office.
Yeah.
So the critics hated it. But the thing is, the critics do tend to hate. Like I said, I think that was during Siskel and Ebert's heyday, and they Siskel and Ebert weren't really big in. I don't remember them being very big into like popcorn action flicks. Like the critics tend to talk down about that kind of entertainment, but people liked it. Like it was commercially successful.
Yeah. The reason why I talk about like not having a lot of marketing or something like that is because when your budget is 23 mil and you only make 80 million at the box office nowadays, with how much marketing can cost nowadays, you would look at that and go, ooh, tough luck. It's like, what? They made back double their budget, like 4 times their budget. Yeah, but 23 mil to 80 mil, you got to bust out at least 100 mil. Because, John, marketing nowadays, it's intense. Like you'll have a movie that's like, oh, this movie cost 500 million. You're like, whoa. And then it's like, but don't worry, it made $1 billion. And you're like, excellent. And it's like, actually, it should make 1.3 billion just to break even. Excuse me? When did this happen?
Yeah, that's disgustingly a lot of money.
By the way, if you're wondering, Matt, were you just making up a movie? No, I wasn't. I was talking about the live-action Justice League movie.
Really?
Yes, it made double its budget, but because of advertising. And I think also some of that double its budget was also overseas.
Well, they did go all in on advertising. There was trailers, there was Burger King cups, there was covers of Come Together, and
it was also on like you could literally see them in Times Square. You and I being from New York, that's very important to us for some reason. Like we're like, oh yeah, that's cool, but like we're never in Times Square enough to be like, wow, that's amazing, like to really appreciate it. It was funny though. Henry Cavill sat in a seat staring at himself, and no one came up to him.
Really?
Yes, and he laughed about it. He like took a video of him behind himself or in front of himself, and he was like, not one person. And it was really funny. Well, no, because like everyone's in New York, you're busy, you're a tourist, you're being slow.
Yeah, and Henry Cavill, like that, I wouldn't know Henry Cavill on the street, like if I saw him, to be completely honest.
But what I was going to say to you though, so you mentioned Turrican before. We were talking about this before the podcast a few days ago. So Universal Soldier game was developed by the Code Monkeys and published by Accolade in '92. The game was a conversion of Turrican 2, The Final Fight, for the Sega Genesis and Game Boy. Another version was planned later or developed for the SNES, but it was never released. Maybe it had to do with the fact that they were switching over to the N64, so they were like, fuck it, just dump it. The beta for the game, though, has been leaked, so you could probably play a beta of it from the looks of it, but I don't have that in front of me, but I remember reading that somewhere recently. Now, for the Genesis and the Game Boy, the reason why I was wondering if you had it, John, is because I'm not saying that they should be expensive, but they do seem to be harder to find.
It's a kind of curiosity.
What was that?
It's kind of a curiosity, like you said, that kind of thing. Like, no matter how good or successful the game was, it's rare enough, like it's a hot commodity.
Well, I just think that maybe a lot of people either trying to complete their collections, or people like you. Usually, you're the person who buys a game, for $20 in some bargain bin or something. So I assume this was one of your bargain bin games, because I was under the impression going into this that you had seen it in the 90s.
No.
Yeah, because you have a lot of fun games. We've talked about this on our Those Guys Play channel. You have a lot of interesting games from your PS1 and Dreamcast collection that literally you just walked into a place. They were just trying to... Your words exactly, you had a 20 burning in your pocket, and they were just trying to get things out the door for some reason or another.
Yeah, because in keeping with what I had mentioned earlier about me getting into things way late in the game,
right?
That's another example of that, is getting in on systems when they're in, at the end of their lifespan, so everything's clearancing out.
I mean, literally, you just got a PS4 this year.
I'm a pop cultural, or I was more so back then, a pop cultural buzzard. Just wait for things to be,
But
wait
hey,
for the hype.
for some of the games that you have now that are worth hundreds of dollars or more, well, no, not more. I just said hundreds of dollars. But still, that are actually worth a pretty penny. You did good there, so I thought you had done good here too. So I messaged you. I'm like, "Hey, John, you have Universal Soldier game?" And you were like, "I think I knew that was a thing. I don't know." And I'm like, "Okay."
Plus, if it was a video game and it wasn't an RPG or a fighting game, the chances of me having it for any system at any point in my life were relatively slim.
It was on the Game Boy. I assume there was like at least one page in a Nintendo Power somewhere, but maybe it just wasn't promoted.
Oh, sure, it probably was. It probably was, and like I said, it just slipped through my my fingers because I wasn't really tuned into it in the '90s.
But so when you did see this movie, what year was it? I'm curious. How late in the game did you see this film?
Like 2012. Like,
okay, so around the time one of the newer ones came out, actually.
Yeah, I was just discovering or I was aware of the series, but I was actually sitting down to the movie for the first time because I think I was on a Van Damme kick because I think I was ironically rewatching the Street Fighter movie because I had found it on DVD in like Best Buy for like $10, and because it was way after it had come out. It was basically just a bargain bin DVD,
right?
And I was watching it, and I was watching it ironically because I remember I had seen it as a kid, and I remembered how bad it was and how little it really had to do with Street Fighter. But it ended up having this like hypnotic charm, and Van Damme's performance in particular as Guile, like I said, he was playing an American once again, where in this case there was not even any attempt to explain his accent.
I loved it that in canon they're like, yeah,
he's from Louisiana.
His family has a farm and his mom is French. Go fuck yourself. And I was like, all right, that's fair.
Early on, they did that a lot. I think they did that in a few of his early roles, where they would try to explain why, because they need him to be an American as apple pie action hero if the action movie going public is going to accept him. But also, I think getting rid of Van Damme's accent would have been more trouble probably than it was worth. So they just said, we'll throw in a line explaining why he sounds, in this case, Belgian or sounds French. But
I just find it so funny that they're like, we have to make him as American as apple pie, as if Arnold Schwarzenegger has not graced our American soils with "I'll be back."
Yeah, and he's Austrian. So we have an Austrian and a Belgian that make up half of the pantheon of 80s and 90s action movies, with the other half being Sylvester Stallone and Bruce Willis. But one interesting factor that I absolutely must include in this podcast, though, because one of my favorite bits of trivia of all time is,
all right.
Of general trivia that doesn't relate to Star Trek, let's say that. Jean-Claude Van Damme learned English from watching the Flintstones.
Yabba dabba, what the fuck? All right, cool, good for him.
Yabba dabba, do time. It's here. But so that's always impressed me, and I always found it very fascinating. But
I'm just imagining different items that they used in this movie actually being animals that say it's a living.
I was about to say Jane gets me off this crazy thing, but that's it. But yeah, so that's what it means. So getting rid of his accent was basically a lost cause. Yeah. And also too, with him, just as with Arnold, we buy it because we don't really. Their acting is almost, and like I said, I don't mean to cast aspersions on action film stars, but their acting is kind of beside the point anyway. Like, I don't think anybody going to a Van Damme movie or going to a Schwarzenegger movie was worried over much about them sounding authentically one way or the other.
And that's why I like this movie, because the acting, at least on Lundgren's side, was very unexpected. And having the main lead, you could argue love interest, but done in a way that I don't think was stereotypical bullshit. And the reason I say that is because it never made any kind of like, it never made it seem like the two of them are in love, just like they're trying to survive, and she definitely wants a piece of that. But it never made it seem like it was one of those. Because I think the thing that I hate about most a decent chunk of action movies is, for some reason, the two of them are attracted to each other, but in a way that makes it seem like there's going to be something more, as if it's like the two of them can't just sleep together and bounce. For some reason, it has to be like, well, I guess we're in love now. And it's like, this movie's in real time. This has been 42 minutes.
Yeah. It's like trauma bonding, basically. And if we looked at it with the lens that we have now, you know, it's and I think in the movie Speed, which came out not too long after this, they kind of like referenced that at the end when you know, the main character and the quote unquote leading lady are like finally hooking up after the danger's over. They're like, oh, well, you know, you can't base a relationship on one shared experience. And then they're like, well, we can base it on sex. And that's basically the action movie romance subplot in a nutshell. It's almost,
that's the thing.
You know, like this.
If it's just sex, I'm okay with that. But it's when they're like, what if it was more? And I'm like, that's no. Why? You just met. Y'all just met. And also they're usually not just built up well in general. Now, what I want to say though, John, is I thought that maybe there was a page promoting Universal Soldier on the Game Boy in Nintendo Power. However, there was actually, like many a game in Nintendo Power, this happened more often than some of you might think. They were actually promoting the SNES version that never came out.
Yeah. I remember there were a lot of previews for games that either didn't end up actually coming out because they just got lost in development hell, or, you know, whatever the case may be, or they were very like broadly changed between their, you know, the preview and the release. I would have to go into my pile and look through, and as I said, I can guarantee you that what I can probably do is I can look up online now what issue each game was covered in, and we can probably find it. Like I said, I started.
Were you a fan of GamePro back in the day?
No, well, I mean, because the thing is, back then, and this was during the height of the system wars, is that we were always very partial to one thing, and I remember brand loyalty being a big deal when I was a kid.
No, because GamePro had everything.
Yeah, I had Nintendo Power, and I was kind of because I was a Nintendo like loyalist when I was a kid. Is that I only wanted all the official Nintendo stuff. I wouldn't mess with Sega. I wouldn't mess with any other publication besides Nintendo Power. One time at Penn Station, I got a I think like a Game Informer from a newsstand, and I felt like
vomited.
Dirty. And I was just like, this feels wrong. I feel like I'm cheating.
What year was this? Because I have a feeling you were far too old to be feeling this way.
Well, I mean, I was 10, but I was a 10-year-old with anxiety, so think of that what you will.
No, 10 is fine. I imagined you being 14 and being like, this is filthy. And it's like, John, you're
No, by 14 I had become a PlayStation slut, I think, as well. I think I still had I think I had an N64, but you know, the lack of Final Fantasy was really making my eye wander, and I began to
dabble. So no, I mentioned this because there's an issue of GamePro, specifically anyone who wants to look this up. Issue number 43. Well, it says issue number 37. August 92, and it said, and there's two Van Damme and Lundgren. I don't believe it actually is the two of them, but they are lookalikes, and they're on the cover. They took over the whole damn thing, John, and on it's like Universal Soldier, a summer scorcher for SNES and Game Boy, and I'm like, that's funny. Bonus, hot picks from the upcoming movie. Okay, so then they really were trying to promote this. Then maybe I'm wrong. They actually did put enough money into it that they thought this was going to legitimately be a franchise, because it's like, well, we have Van Damme and Lundgren. How could we go wrong? And in my opinion, despite their critical non-acclaim, I don't think they went wrong.
Yeah, I think they've just put a lot of their eggs in that basket based on star power. And it's funny you mention that, because I remember that there were a lot of movies, particularly action movies, that they immediately cross-produced or cross-promoted the video game for it before they even knew how it was going to do in the box office. Yeah, they were banking on the fact that because it was a summer. I remember like Last Action Hero and Total Recall got again, licensed games. Most of them weren't good, but they kind of said, well, you know what, this is going to be big enough on the strength of being a summer blockbuster that we can produce a licensed game for it, and kids will buy it.
I'm curious about the Total Recall game.
Oh my God! Again, we could do an entire segment with that. It is a hilariously bad licensed game, and it was a part of my childhood because my cousin rented it from a video store that went out of business, and he was allowed to keep it because there was nowhere to bring it back to. And it was just awful. It was awful, and we still played it because it was awful.
What did he get it for?
NES.
Total Recall?
Yeah.
Huh.
He got a shitty NES port. In name only. It had really very little to do with the movie outside of a few, reproducing a few iconic scenes, which again was probably enough to sell it. Was just that on that recognition.
I'm just confused because I want to see. Okay, wow, that's odd. No, you are correct, John. Obviously, you lived it. But when I looked on the actual Total Recall, film page on Wikipedia, it does not list the NES version as a version. So I was like, oh, did he have a Commodore 64, a ZX Spectrum, an Amstrad CPC, an Amiga, an Atari ST? Well, no, I was genuinely I was being serious. I'm genuinely confused until you said NES, and I was like, I had to just look at it on its own page.
It was not a very popular game, to the point that I'm sure that there are large chunks of people that don't even know it exists. But
they might be finding out right now.
Yeah, I'm looking it up awful. Right now. I don't think I've ever actually bothered to finish it. We never finished it as kids because it was bad and hard.
Yeah, no, I could get it right now for $5.
But one thing though, and I'm going to say this before God and your entire podcasting audience.
Okay.
The level music in the Total Recall NES game slaps. I am not going to apologize. That is a really catchy earworm piece of music, and then you owe it to yourself to go listen to it when you finish this podcast.
All right, I definitely will. That's hilarious. No, because, there is some... I think there was, one random... It was, a bingo game or pachinko. I forgot what type of game it was. It was for, the NES. And because of who worked on it, it was, one of the best soundtracks on the NES, from what I've heard. And it was just hilarious because it's guys, this is just a random X game, whatever the franchise... It wasn't even franchise. Whatever, the sport or whatever the piece of the whatever it was.
Puzzle.
But yeah, puzzle, yeah, whatever. But it wasn't. It was just the composer just having a good time. Now, I mentioned though something that I found interesting. The relationships with the characters. Jumping back to the film itself for a second, the film proper. I really enjoyed the journalist because she was a kick-ass character.
She was like April O'Neil.
But a bit more real. April O'Neil was real, but I don't know,
less cartoony.
Yeah, maybe it had to do with the fact that she wasn't actually a cartoon. But all jokes aside, I really do feel and that's the thing. I was imagining you watching this when you were younger and having a crush on her. So now I'm just oh, he just had a crush on her as an adult.
You really can't go wrong with plucky female reporter in any time period of my life, I don't think.
But the fact that she was actively criticizing the film along with us, I genuinely think it helped. It was actually...
she was the audience surrogate in a way.
Very much. She was so you're French? And I was oh, we're just talking about this. Okay. No, because they
addressing all the questions the audience doubtlessly has.
Well, because they didn't question Schwarzenegger until Terminator 3.
Yeah, it's why do these cyborgs from the future sound Austrian?
Yes, exactly. So the fact that they were just immediately questioning that, she said some other really funny one-liners. Oh, I remember one. My favorite one was when she was what are we gonna do? He's we must stop the bus. She's no shit.
Buckle up for safety.
She didn't say no shit, but basically that was her reaction. She was she said something she said, what a bright idea. And I lost it.
Yeah, there was pretty good banter and pretty good chemistry between them. And I feel that's a big component of an action movie. And although I wouldn't describe her character as revolutionary as any kind of, piece of feminist iconography, but she was I think she acquitted herself better than the typical like action movie leading lady was often allowed to.
See, yeah, that's the thing, man. Like, look, I totally get that, today you'd want her to be one of the soldiers, obviously, because why can't she be, right? I totally get you there. Or why she can't be kicking ass as well in some fashion.
But she didn't do too badly in that department though. Like she wasn't like, she wasn't a pure on damsel in distress. Like she was kind of along for the action.
Exactly. Somehow they made it so that while yes, the entire movie is around him making sure that she doesn't get shot in the face, but they don't usually
it's an escort
put her
mission.
What?
It's like a big escort mission.
Yes, but they don't put her in a position where she consistently needs to be saved. And I think that's what was interesting about the movie. Like, the only part where she really needed to be saved was during the part where she meets Van Damme's character. After that, it's really... I mean, obviously that, the end as well. Literally just the end. I would feel the end and when she met his character. But throughout the film, it felt like it was both of them being in tough shit. Like it wasn't like, oh, well, I have to save her. It's like, no. This guy's gunning for you too, man. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, they have like the same stake in it.
Yes, which I think is good.
And the story doesn't revolve around saving her and things like that. So she's a participant in the events of the film, just from a different standpoint.
And also her being the one, I mean, yeah, you could argue like, really, you could just kind of jump onto this not so military base and no one notices you until that exact moment. Really?
Yeah, action movie logic.
Of course. But I do enjoy, I don't know, I feel like her energy, what she brings to this, it does seem different to me than standard, like, oh no, please save me, Jean-Claude Van Damme. And it's like, I'm French and I will. Like, it felt very much like, look, we're both going to be fucked here. So unless you want to get fucked and I want to get fucked, we're going to make sure to get out of this. Okay, pal?
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that type of, that energy and that type of atmosphere because, yeah, it seems like, standard action movie, it's, wow, you're very attractive. Like, I feel like she's like, look, all right, I got a lot going on. If you want to bang it out, I got about like 30 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. And she's kind of like a little bit of, has that sense that she's the brains of the operation. He's the brawn, but she's, she kind of comes up with the plans and things like that. Not unlike, a sort of Princess Leia from A New Hope sort of thing, where she takes control of the situation.
I love that you mentioned that because she sounded a little bit like Carrie Fisher. I don't know if it was
yeah, it might have been just, coincidence, might have been a deliberate kind of thing. But if so, definitely on the shoulders of giants with that one.
And she's acted in other stuff as well. If any of you guys out there, any of y'all out there have seen Sons of Anarchy, Longmire, Tell Me You Love Me? All right. I've never seen any of these. She was in Kazam. Oh, God, Kazam. Oh, God.
Speaking of 90s movies.
Oh, Kazam.
She was probably the mom, I bet you.
But she was also in a movie called While You Were Sleeping, When the Bow Breaks, Singles, Happy Texas. All right. I've seen none of these. I know about Sons of Anarchy, though, and that one was huge.
I did see While You Were Sleeping. That's another 90s memory that didn't resurface until like just now. That was a Bill Pullman, Sandra Bullock vehicle. Remember Bill Pullman?
Let me see.
Independence Day, he was the president.
Yes, I do. Now I do. He was also in Casper, something that I have on VHS. So I definitely knew him as Casper before I knew him as the president on Independence Day. And he was also in Spaceballs. He wasn't Casper.
He was the dad. He was the dad. He was the dad from Casper.
Huh. That's so interesting. This is, oh my God, he was in Torchwood Miracle Day. And seeing as who he was, I need to pour bleach into my own eyes. I'll tell that to you later, John. So we've deep dived into this for like an hour, and yet still I feel like I don't have a full grasp on whether or not, John, do you like this movie?
I would say so. It wasn't the kind of thing that I think I would revisit. As a Van Damme stan, I guess if you want to.
Oh God, what year are we in?
I'm catching up. I think I'm at 2014 or 2015 by now.
Yeah.
But yeah, as I said, it wasn't. I watched it in 2012, and then I had never really had the urge to revisit it. Like it was, that's why I call it the Van Damme sphere, because so many, not that so many of his movies seem the same, but there are a lot of similar beats that are hit with action movies of the time. So I feel like I just appreciate it as part of the overall Van Damme experience rather than individually. Individually, I think it's worth at least a once over. It's basically popcorn.
I don't know. I look at it as more than that. I don't know, man. I'm not saying this is not our Citizen Kane or anything, but no, I think that
smarter than the average action movie.
Well, I think it's because I came into this expecting nothing, and I mean like nothing. And so getting some quirkiness, the way Lundgren sells his character, the fucking ears, the deaths, make me think a lot of like RoboCop.
That kind of ultra violent kind of thing.
Yeah, and again, look, I totally understand that it's definitely the PTSD themes are very clunky, McClunky. I can't say clunky anymore without thinking of McClunky. You know that, right?
Yes.
Yeah, the Star Wars edit, the Disney Plus edit. All of you should see it.
Yeah.
McClunky.
Yeah.
But it really is, the themes are clunky, don't get me wrong, and they don't really like hold on to them as long as they should and really push into them. It just kind of veers into action movie towards the end more so than actually it being about the war and about PTSD. So I do get all that, but I don't know. I think because I expected nothing, the fact that it was like you say, it was popcorn, but popcorn ain't bad, especially the type of popcorn this was. I think it was something that I'm happy that I missed in a way, because I think if I saw this, well, I couldn't have technically seen this at the time. This was actually this was conceived the same year that I was, so I would not have been old enough to watch this at the time. I was quite literally I was a fetus. I'm a September baby. This came out in July.
So these are two incredible things to come out of 1992. There's you, and then there's right below that is Universal Soldier.
Yes, exactly. You are correct, John, in that assessment of the situation. And you were 8 at the time, so yeah. you would not have been able to see this.
I mean, my parents did take me to they would take me to R-rated movies if of course if I was going with them. We didn't see many, unless there's something that my mom or dad really wanted to watch, but we didn't really, we didn't go to a ton of like those types of movies. I don't think when I was around that age.
I mean, understandable. I mean, my family, it was one of those things where my dad would be like, "Hey, close your eyes."
My mom would. I remember my mom's hand going in front of my face when there'd be nudity or super violence.
Exactly, it totally makes sense. Same here. So yeah, but I don't know, like I really, like I would show this movie to other people. Like I would watch this movie more than once. I'm not saying it's my favorite movie or anything, but I would definitely like watch it more than one time. Granted, there's a lot to do, so like I'm not saying I'm going to sit here and watch it without showing other people, but I'm not embarrassed about this movie. Like there's certain movies you watch and you're like, man, I like it, or there's other movies where you're like, oh yeah, I definitely don't like this, but you want to bring other people to watch it ironically. But this movie, I think if you just go into it hearing like, oh, it's just another action movie, oh, Van Damme's in it and Lundgren, so you're gonna at least get some good action scenes, I guess.
Yeah, it's the higher. It is required reading. Like I said, I wouldn't definitely include this in any Van Damme marathon. Like I feel like this is required Van Damme viewing. It's definitive. I would say it's definitely one of the more memorable roles that he was in, and I would definitely include it in his like definitive, pop culture collection. Along with the others, along with Time Cop and along with Bloodsport.
I think it's very funny though that obviously his name is Jean-Claude Van Damme and his character's name is Luke, and all I can think of is Jean-Luc the entire time.
Yeah, exactly.
Like
so yeah.
How French is that? How is that like overly French?
It was Luc Devereaux as the character. Yeah, so it was pretty damn French.
Okay.
Especially considering the only Devereaux most of us knew at that point was Blanche.
I know that
Golden
name.
Girls.
Oh, okay, right. And I don't know if Blanche was like overly French. I've never seen the Golden
Yeah, it
Girls
is. Well,
in
she
full.
wasn't, but it was a French name though.
Got it. Got it. Okay, I'm only chuckling because I'm looking at internally. That's why I paused. I'm looking at Van Damme's his discography or his filmography rather, and it said video games under his filmography, and I was confused. I was like, Van Damme is in his own. What does he have? Like a Van Damme game?
Like Kung Fu Panda.
No, it was Street Fighter the movie.
Yep.
Because
the Street Fighter the movie used mocap.
Yes.
Just like Mortal Kombat. So yeah,
Yes.
his likeness was actually in the game, along with all the other actors from the movie.
So yeah, if some people don't remember, there was a Street Fighter, the movie, the game. Now it was not called the movie, the game, but everyone consistently calls it that because it's so much funnier.
And it's basically, if you can imagine a copy of a copy of a copy of Street Fighter the movie, the game would probably be it.
It's just like this game of telephone that you had on the playground as a kid.
Yeah. Which is kind of like what the movie, but that's true to the movie. That's what the movie felt like. Was someone explain the plot of Street Fighter badly and then have somebody repeat it to the next person after them.
Kind of, yeah. So you came into this, of course, expecting nothing as well. So it won you over, just not like mildly. It won you over. But were you expecting more with Lundgren and from Van Damme or no?
I was kind of really only going into it as a fan of Van Damme. Like I said, the only reason I was watching it was because he was in it. I probably wouldn't have even checked it out otherwise. And like I said, I never really was like into the Rocky series. And honestly, I'm gonna be completely honest, I didn't see the He-Man movie either. So Dolph Lundgren didn't really. Not that he didn't mean much to me, but I wasn't super familiar with his work.
That's funny. For me, it's the exact opposite. My dad loved Rocky, so "I Will Break You" was quoted every summer.
I must break you.
No, seriously, the amount of times my dad quoted "I must break you," and we would laugh. So it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, I totally know like Lundgren more than I do Van Damme, and I don't know why. I guess maybe because a lot of his heyday was around the time where I was too much of a wee little lad. That perhaps, it didn't cross over with me. But, like, just looking at some of his movies, especially, Kickboxer, Cyborg, Bloodsport, before I was born.
Cyborg is another one that's worth checking out just for how weird it is, because Cyborg was originally going to be a Masters of the Universe movie. I think it was going to be a sequel to... It was either originally going to be the Masters of the Universe movie, or it was going to be a sequel to the one that did come out, but it stopped being that fairly early in production. But they just kind of took it the rest of the way with Van Damme. But yeah, Cyborg is also worth checking out.
Sorry, I'm very confused right now. Okay, good. I'm not crazy. Did you ever hear of the JVC XI, the game console?
No.
Oh, okay.
I missed that one.
It was a CD based one. It got me confused because Van Damme was in a movie called JCVD, and I had to hold on. I thought it was gonna fall.
That was a biopic.
Yeah, no, it came out in '08, but I was holding on to something because I'm like, it just sound because next to the Street Fighter movie, I thought my mind was going into just. I'm like, am I doing okay? Am I asleep? Is this a dream? Or video game memories flooding in? I was like, JVC. I was like, that's a thing. And yeah, the JVC XI. I never had one, never heard of anyone who had one. It seems like you didn't either. Yeah. It was a JVC video game console that obviously did not do well. But yeah, so I can see why people, went to see this, why some people enjoyed this. Critics, I do understand, don't get me wrong. But I don't know if I want to call this like a critical bomb. I wouldn't look at this and be like, oh, F rating. It's like, well, I'm not looking at this the same way that I'm looking at, a movie like Godfather. To be fair, I haven't seen The Godfather, but or at least I did see it, but it was years prior, way too long ago. So I'm not looking at this on the same level. I'm thinking, okay, so I know what a sci-fi action movie, specifically action movies, can be. Is it going to have a shitty romantic subplot? No. They're just kind of into each other, but not like an overlying crazy romantic. Interesting. Is it gonna be a little sexist? Not really. Arguably. Okay. Is it is it reveling in shitty masculine? Oh, it's actually tackling those masculine view. Interesting. Because I feel like they didn't just tackle the anti-war sentiment, they also tackled masculinity in there as well. Van Damme being much smaller than Lundgren.
Yeah, and which is really kind of like a David and Goliath kind of thing. But he was Dolph Lundgren was definitely being held up as one type of man, and Van Damme another. So
maybe they accidentally stumbled. Maybe they only accidentally stumbled into that one. But still, there was just stuff in this movie that I saw that I was just not expecting. I was expecting pew 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 pew. I'm the universal soldier. Yeah, well, America. And that's what I was expecting.
It was a little better than that.
Yeah. So I think that's why I'm drawn to this in the way that I am, because I see a few minutes of it on TV and I'm like, whoa, what the fuck is this? Why this guy literally is like going crazy in a supermarket talking about losing people in the war, and he has them in the freezer. And I was like, what?
It's good because it has a concept. It may be a fairly when it comes down to it, it might seem like a fairly basic and by the numbers action movie, but it does have a hook. It has a concept and the idea of taking the idea of veterans being used or soldiers being used as disposable commodities. It kind of takes that idea a step further. So it has a hook. It has a concept. And it just being people blasting and things like that. So and all that is really just a vehicle for the action to get started. But at least, as I said, it tried to be about something.
And yeah, that's really why, to me anyway, it actually seems. I don't want to say like it's like speaks to me or anything, but like it definitely does seem just more. It's just more than what I initially thought it was going to be. And so that's kind of why I'm drawn to it, and why I would definitely show some people this movie. Again, like you said, if it's a bigger part of Van Damme's filmography, yeah, I'd check out some other movies. Maybe this one will get bumped off. But I do think it's interesting that this movie also is a franchise as well, and he does come back for later installments. I think that's interesting because it doesn't seem like Van Damme usually is in franchises, or am I wrong there? How wrong am I?
Well, they're not really. This is really the only. I don't want to say the only movie he's been in that has a sequel, but like Van Damme was always in a lot of like one-off movies, not anything that was really part of a larger series. Just kind of a bunch of separate one-off things.
We're only doing one butt kicker movie. All right, cool.
Except for, and then it wasn't even the Expendables 2, I think, or not the Expendables 2.
You're right. Well, he was. I don't know if he was in. Let me check. I think he was
in a villainous role, I believe. Which was kind of interesting.
I know he was in the movie. I just don't know if he was in both of them.
I'm pretty sure he was in at least. I think he was only in 2. I don't think he was in the first one.
Yeah, he was in 2. Also, I thought you were kidding. He's in multiple Kung Fu Pandas.
Yeah, he was in the second one. He was Master Croc.
And he was in the third one too.
Yes. Actually, I couldn't remember because to tell you the truth, I don't remember if I'd seen the third one.
Oh my God, Van Damme is living it. Sorry, let me explain. He was in. I'm not even a fan of this series. It's just that it's insane. I'm sorry, not he was in. He's going to be in Minions 2: The Rise of Gru.
Oh my God.
No. You want to know the character's name? I swear to God.
What?
Jean-Claude, like has a clause. Clawed.
Oh my God.
But yeah, he was.
Was he a lobster?
I don't know. I'm gonna Google this. Thank you for putting that in my head.
Yeah, he's got to be either a lobster or some kind of animal thing.
Let me see. Jean-Claude, Minions 2. I can't believe we're doing this. Electrical Boogaloo. Can't believe we're doing this right now. Yeah, I don't see the character just by Googling it. Interesting.
We may not be meant to know yet.
And that's fine. I don't need to at all. So let me see what else he's been in. He's been in a lot of stuff recently. Kickboxer Vengeance. Kickboxer 2 Retaliation. Wait, so they just made more Kickboxer movies? All right.
Yeah, like I said, I think I saw the first one. That wasn't a series that I followed though. So if there were any more of his that continued to be a series, I really didn't look into them.
Okay, what I find funny is that there's a kickboxer movie, the first one that came out in '89, and then a second kickboxer movie in '91 called Kickboxer 2: The Road Back. So unless it's a different universe or they're just trying to say that it's a sequel to the spin-off, I love how there's two Kickboxer 2s.
The one with and one without him.
No. They both have him. One is in 2018 and one is in 91. Kickboxer 2: The Road Back in 91, and then in 2018, Kickboxer 2: Retaliation. The reason why I said, they made two of them is because they're under his filmography. He's in both.
So why do they make two twos?
I'm sorry.
18 years apart.
I don't know why they did that, but I can tell you he was not in Kickboxer 2: The Road Back. He wrote it, though. That's why it's under his... Yeah.
Writing credit.
Also, I think Van Damme wrote the Wikipedia page. It says under notes. It says no role, just maked characters. I think Van Damme wrote that.
It could, or you know what it was? It probably a lot of his fan base is probably European and probably is from France and Belgium. So they may have been someone for whom English was not a first language.
I'm just hoping it's Van Damme, though. Something tells me I really am just hoping it is Van Damme.
You want to see him? I mean, he is the kind of guy who is like down to earth and hands on enough that he probably would, edit his own page.
By the way, he was in. Sorry, keep going.
I was going to say weird other credit of his. I think it was just called JCVD or something like that, or it was JCVD 365 or something. It was a slice of life documentary that was on. I think it was BBC.
Yeah, that's what we were talking about before.
It was a series.
No, that's what we were talking about before. Remember the video game console? The JVCD is the biopic that you were just mentioning.
And it was like, because one was a standalone movie that was, like I said, it was like a slice of, not really slice of life, but like it was about him specifically. And then there was a series. There was a documentary series that was about him. That was about him training up to fight a younger fighter, like a younger competitor.
Okay, so yes.
And it was, went into his life, his personal life and things like that, his relationship with his wife.
Yes, you're thinking of this. Okay, you're thinking of, so this is JVCD. It's a 2008 Belgian crime drama film directed by French-Tunisian film director Mabrouk El Mekri, and starring Jean-Claude Van Damme as a semi-fictionalized version of himself, a down-and-out action star whose family and career are crumbling around him as he is caught in the middle of a post office heist in his hometown of Brussels, Belgium.
And everyone's expecting him to be the action hero and like save the day,
right?
And he's just another scared hostage. Like I remember that was a very powerful movie. That's worth checking out. He has this really awesome soliloquy at the end. That is obviously he was coming from a very personal place, and that was like later on when they started to look at him as a person and see that he was kind of. I know he had struggles with mental illness, and a lot. So you got to see the guy behind the action star. And it was actually, he's definitely a nice and a decent guy. He's big into doing live streams with his, or, video appearances where he takes questions and things like that with the fans. So he really is, like I said, in real life, it's really a pretty swell guy as far as I can tell.
I feel so bad, though.
Dogs.
Because, you come out with a movie in 2008 that's like, hey, I am not this action star. And it's like, wow, this is an amazing film. You've revitalized your career. Do you want to continue being an action star? It's like, how many times did he say motherfucker in French while taking the checks?
Well, he loves doing action movies. Like I said, I don't think his passion for that has gone anywhere. I think he still enjoys it, and he still enjoys doing martial arts and things like that. But that was a little bit more of an intimate look at him rather than, he's Van Damme, he's that action star. We got to look at the person for the first time in a long time.
He was also in Sense8 as himself. He's been himself a fair amount of times. He played himself on Robot Chicken.
Yeah, and anytime you need because I think it's hard to do an impression of him that doesn't sound phony baloney. So they probably figure, let's get the real guy. And again, he's kind of a sort of a silly dude, so he wouldn't mind doing a parody appearance of himself. And he also did those, I think it was the Coors Light ads around the time that I was really heavily getting into him. And there was one where he did the split between the two trucks And it was another one of those like really silly, like almost like the Old Spice ads at Terry Crews, like that kind of advertising.
Yeah.
And then he was in like a Tostitos, Tostitos, let's all get together. Like he loves to do almost to kind of play up people's expectations of him, like as the sort of like on all the advertising action star kind of guy.
He seems like the perfect fit for like SNL.
Of course. He already in many ways is like a parody of that type of thing. And I'm always reminded of that at one episode of there was a cartoon called The Critic, where this action movie star guy that was very clearly fashioned after Jean-Claude Van Damme was called Jean-Paul Le Pope.
Yes.
And he was the whole episode he was saying he was going to kill Jay Sherman. He was a film critic who had panned one of his movies. And then in the end he finally corners Jay and shoots him, but it's just a water pistol. And he says, "Oh, like most action stars, I'm dainty as a doily." And it ends up kind of being a truth and fiction kind of thing, because really all of them are pretty gentle and empathic guys in real life, like Sly Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger, and especially Jean-Claude Van Damme is kind of a very like a gentle soul in real life, and is a very like emotionally demonstrative kind of person.
I want to, and I'm sure he's a great guy, like everything you just said, but I'm looking at his mullet in 1993, and if I could travel back in time, like the Terminator, I'd tell him, please don't take pictures at the Cannes Film Festival with a mullet in 1993.
You could get away with it in '93 though. Like
I know.
The mullets and rat tails and stuff like that. You could, that was the time.
I'm just saying, I would just talk to him and I'd say, you look like Joe Dirt, and he'd be like, who? And I'd be like, you're gonna learn one day, and you're not gonna like it.
But no, I think we were all kind of absolved of our '90s haircuts. I think there was
the
unspoken
Pope. The Pope came around. You've been absolved of your 90s haircut. You said thank you for
no one will speak. We will never speak again of your bowl haircuts or your rat tails or having a dollar sign shaved into the side of your head.
Did I tell you once that students of mine thought that I had a mullet?
Well, you just have long hair.
But they thought that my haircut was a mullet. They were like, why does he have a mullet? And I was like, what?
Do you know what a mullet is?
That's the thing. I don't think they do.
Business in the front, party in the back. It's your hair's not short enough on top to be a mullet.
That's what I'm trying to. Yeah, that's what I was saying. I was like, wow, these kids are just, and they weren't even like I was dealing with. I don't because it wasn't me who heard it. It was someone else who relayed the info to me, and I was like, did you show them pictures of what a mullet is?
Yeah, I think that might be coming from a place of misinformation.
But anyway, yeah. So you spoke about Van Damme kind of being very fun, and it seemed like everyone had fun with this movie. Even though yes, there were some tense moments, but I think some of the jokes did undercut it, not in a negative way. But I think so. I mean, it was a weird tone, but I still think that everyone did have fun. And I think one of the funniest scenes was I thought that they were going to be under the bed with the couple that was, having a good time. And no, they were just under the covers. And I'm assuming they were completely naked. So literally, she's just like, "Look, I'm really, really sorry." And I just lost it. I was like, "This is actually really."
Yeah, the comedy was pretty. As I said, the standard action movie stuff was still pretty good. It was definitely tongue in cheek, but you did get a sense, and I do know that Lundgren and Van Damme enjoy working together, and I think they're actually fairly close in real life.
That's nice, because you could definitely tell that there was. That's the thing. It doesn't, even though this movie has generic action movie written all over it, it doesn't seem like people half-assed it.
Oh no, everybody gave it their all. Even if they felt like it was kind of just a summer blockbuster type action movie, you could tell that they were having a good time. And Van Damme doesn't really phone it in. He's really the kind of actor that whatever the project is, he really kind of throws his whole self into it.
So here's something really funny. You just mentioned their relationship being good, and apparently at the '92, is it Cannes? The film festival, the Cannes Film Festival. Apparently, Van Damme and Lundgren were involved in a verbal altercation that almost turned physical when both men pushed each other only to be separated. However, on his website, Lundgren confirmed that it was just a publicity stunt to promote the movie.
So they were like, "Oh no, look, they're fighting in real life. The battle, the battle for."
Well, that's the weird thing. Like movies back then, action movies took a very pro wrestling approach, and it's just like, no, 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 guys, like pro wrestling, that's quote unquote real, but like this isn't. Do you know what I mean? Like no one, like it feels weird if someone walked up to like Jean-Claude Van Damme and was like, Luke. It's like people do that, but that's very different than but that's different than WWE, where it's actually, I don't know if you know this, John. It is improper and like really fucked up to look at a pro wrestler, let's say even like The Undertaker, and call him by his real name.
Well, it's kayfabe.
Yes. Okay, good. You do know about that. Yes. I don't know, because I know you're not a big fan of pro wrestling. Yes. But like you don't break that. But it's so different compared to movies where if I looked at Keanu and was like, Neo, he's like, yeah. Like it's actually the exact opposite. So it's just kind of funny that like, it's like, yeah, it's like they have real tension. And it's like, guys, this is a sci-fi movie. We're not looking for that real action film tension. Maybe some do, but I feel like that is completely off base.
Yeah, and again, it might have been cashing in on that kind of pro wrestling sort of approach where it's like, oh, they have real heat in real life that will really sell the conflict in the movie. And it's just that it's a stunt. All it really is about just gaining attention. And
which I mean,
people
pre-Twitter, so you have to do what you have to do.
Right. This is viral marketing before viral marketing.
Yeah, because I'm sure the next day people were like, oh, in the wake of the new film of Jean-Claude Van Damme and Dolph Lundgren were seen like yelling at the film festival. Yeah, okay, they were yelling at the film festival, like, you know what I'm saying? But
yeah, so
it made it to 9 o'clock.
And certainly the technique of generating controversy to promote a film is definitely not something that has gone away. We see that even more now.
We do, but I think it's not so much fist fights usually. I mean, that was a very on the nose approach. But I will admit, Fast and the Furious does a little bit of it. Does a little bit every now and again to kind of poke and prod. But I think it's funny though, because I don't know if it's always actually no. Yeah, sometimes it's even between I think it was The Rock and Vin Diesel, who in Fast and the Furious, Rock is a former cop or is currently a cop, and Vin Diesel is part of a family. From what I hear. Also, did you know there's an alternative ending? I don't know if you got the special edition DVD, like a cool kid.
Of Unisol?
Yeah.
I don't even
when
remember.
You call it Unisol, it sounds like something that keeps the Universal Soldiers away.
It's a spray.
Yeah.
That's your doctor if Unisol is right for you.
Yeah. So anyway, the special, I'm going to read it directly from the wiki page. I don't know what you're eating, John, but I want some of it. The special edition DVD release features an alternative ending, which starts shortly after Scott takes Devereaux's family and Roberts hostage. As Devereaux grabs a shotgun in the kitchen, the front door opens and he sees his mother at the door before Scott shoots her to death. In the final fight between Devereaux and Scott, Devereaux does not use Scott's muscle enhancers. Shortly after grinding Scott to death, by the way, that was interesting.
You're just charged, Sarge.
I'm sorry, I loved it. Devereaux is shot by his father, quote unquote, before Dr. Christopher Gregor and his men appear. Gregor explains that he used Devereaux to entrap both him and Scott, and that Devereaux was staying with people posing as his parents. I got to admit, I thought they were posing as his parents. He then has his men shoot Devereaux, but before Devereaux dies, the police and Roberts' news crew arrive. The news crew douse Devereaux with a fire extinguisher to stabilize him, while Dr. Gregor and his men are arrested. This started off horrible and then turned hilarious. Roberts
shooting him with a fire extinguisher.
No. I'll explain why in a second. Roberts is given the microphone to cover the arrest, but she loses all composure while on air, dropping the microphone to comfort Devereaux. Ooh, then that turned into shitty. Several days later, Devereaux is reunited with his real parents. Hooray! The film ends with a eulogy narrated by Roberts, who explains that Devereaux rejected all life-prolonging medication before dying a natural death. So let me tell you why this alternate ending is shit. Because it goes from, oh my god, this is so horrible, your mom dies, right? So immediately I'm like, ooh, that's killer. Even for what this movie was doing, that hurts, right? Because I'm assuming he would have shot her the same way he probably shot that guy in Nam. So, yeah, so in this version, Devereaux's quote-unquote mom gets killed by Scott. And then it turns into, Devereaux does get the upper hand on Scott, kills him. But then his quote-unquote father shoots him because they were actually a family in disguise. They were there set up by this not-so-military organization. Just to, like, entrap him. But don't you worry, John. Because mom and dad are A-okay somewhere else for no reason.
Yeah, what? You can see why they changed that.
What? And by the way, no, this is where it starts to get... Before that even, by the way, the fact that they somehow sandwiched in, and the cops come in and arrest him, and the news media knows about it, it takes it... If you weren't going to do an R rating, that's a very PG-13 way of ending it.
Yeah. Yeah, a little bit.
But for an R rating, like, what the fuck? By the way, what are you eating? I want some of that.
I'm not eating anything. I was hanging my clothes up.
Oh, okay. It sounds like you're crunching like a bag, and it sounds like you're crunching a chip, and I'm like, well, what are you crunching, John?
Oh, you're picking up the chip, the sound of what sounds like chips, it's my stress ball.
Oh, okay. Well, then...
Which, that's a pretty good mic if it picked that up, but yeah.
No, I don't think it's the ball. I think it's you maybe hanging up clothes. I'm hearing the hangers, maybe.
Yeah.
Anyway, but you see what I'm saying? It seems like it's a very, like, PG-13 way of ending it, but, like, them actually fucking trying to end a rated R movie that way, like, I think the fade to black was just fine for me, personally.
Yeah. No, the way they handled it was fine. I didn't find myself wishing the ending had been different.
Yeah, but I do believe, though, I was watching the film, I just said it before, I really feel like they were a family that was just posing there, because it's just like, why are you randomly French in a farm in Louisiana? Like, it was just so odd to me that I was like, maybe this is a thing that happens and I'm just the idiot here.
No, it's just a far-fetched idea. It's actually, there's no trick about it in the movie. It's just a bit of a reach.
So I was wondering, I was like, are you trying to do something different? I don't know. But like, so it would have actually been interesting if it did lead to that. But no, the rest of this ending, this alternate ending sounds awful. And they filmed the whole thing too. So they had to have done like a test audience screening or something. And they were like, what did you think about it? And they got universally panned by their audience.
Yeah.
They were like, no.
Yeah, no, most likely. And you know what? That I've seen a lot of movies where that happened, and in a lot of cases it was for the better.
Yeah, and it's funny. Sometimes I'm like, oh man, what could have been? Sometimes I'm actually rooting for it. But this is not one of those
we dodged
situations.
the bullet. That was a good call.
Yeah, no, this is one of those I'm like, oh, thank God. It could have been so much worse. That I would have been shitting on this movie. I'd been like, man.
And yeah, it would have had a case of crap out at the end.
Definitely. All right, so I think we can end this here. Anything else you want to say about this movie before we wrap this one up?
No, but other than like I said, it's definitely worth a once over, and I would put it in the must see Van Damme pantheon.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a lot of fun. I think it's just the way they blended everything together. Maybe at the time, especially, I think it just came out too late. I think if this came out during the 80s, I think it maybe would have gotten some more love. It would have gotten some more, it would have gotten it got one comic book adaptation, but it maybe would have had more comic books. It was a very short miniseries.
It got one measly comic book adaptation.
Compared to the other juggernauts at the time, yeah. It would have gotten an animated show, more video games, sequels. But yeah, I think that it just came out too late.
Yeah, it was, and by that, like I said, we were entering more of a peacetime, mentality, which may have actually helped the fact that it was critical of war. But yeah, and if it had come out at a different time, it might have been more of a thing. But at least it scratched whatever itch people had in '92, because like I said, it did well enough at the box office.
Yeah, no, it did. Seemingly it did. Although I'm genuinely wondering if, again, on its $23 million budget, making $80 million is nothing to to laugh at or
Sneeze
nothing
at.
to sneeze at. Yeah, you're right. But it definitely does feel like they were probably so into this being a thing with all the promotion that they were like, we're making, look, it's going to be a TV show and it's going to be a fucking movie in 99, but you already have the TV show plan. You shut the fuck up. It's going to be a thing, okay? Like, I just feel like there's some executive through his teeth going, it's going to be good.
It's like they were trying to make it happen. They were trying to make it happen as a franchise. Like, we're going to turn this into a. So it was ambitious from the start, for sure.
I gotta say though, it's really funny. Not them trying to make it a franchise, but like now it seems like that happens all the time. Now
That's almost taken for granted. It's like everything's going to have a shared universe, like expanded cinematic thing. That's almost like assumed now.
yeah,
That anything that you put, it's always the rise of this or the beginning of that, because they just assume that they're going to have, compare that to like Star Wars or things like that, where they weren't sure if it was going to flop or not. Now it's like everything that we release is going to be a media juggernaut that's going to span movies and TV shows. It's like things are allowed to be small and standalone.
Do you remember the I forgot what it was called. I think it was called the Dark Universe. It was the Universal Monsters. They tried to make that into like a fucking like expanded universe, and it just didn't work.
I remember them trying very hard to make that a thing.
Let me see. I'm gonna look up The Mummy with Tom Cruise. That's where they tried to start it. This was 2017, and they were trying to have it be part of the where is it? And then they were trying to make like well, they did have some kind of cameo with Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I forgot how. But no, they were trying to make The Invisible Man, which actually is coming out, or is already out, but it's a horror movie now. It's interesting, actually. But no, they were trying to make it... Yes, there we go. They were trying... The Mummy... This film is part of Universal Pictures' Dark Universe, an attempt to create a modern cinematic universe based on the classic Universal Monsters film series, which, by the way, I don't dislike the approach, but you can't call it a film series franchise cinematic universe before it actually takes off.
You need to know that it has the chops to become an expanded, shared universe.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I'm sure Kevin Feige and Marvel thought about the first Avengers movie when they put Iron Man out there. But if Iron Man flopped, that would be it. I don't believe we had any talk of the Avengers happening during the first Iron Man.
No, they didn't know how it was going to do. It was like a risk. So like, well, let's see how this does, and then it did well enough.
But I bet you they were thinking about it, because
maybe they had it in the back of their mind, but I don't think they were counting their chickens yet. Though.
I think they were, because they're a corporation. But that doesn't mean that you leak it and that you talk to the press and that all of this comes out. Do you know what I'm saying? Like it's something you can go, yeah, we're going to do it if it does well. But it was all out there already before this movie even came out. And there was going to be a remake of Bride of Frankenstein. There was going to be an Invisible Man movie, a movie called a Dracula film, just a specific Dracula film. There was going to be a Frankenstein's monster film. It's hilarious that they were trying to plan all this, and it's like, whoa.
Hey, well, I just want them to know that there already was a Universal Monsters shared universe thing, and it was called Darkstalkers.
That's actually fair. I mean, they had a shared universe. I think the universe peaked, although I actually loved it the most when the universe hit Abbott and Costello.
Yeah, exactly.
I loved Abbott and Costello, man. When they met Scooby-Doo, that was awesome when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Yeah. Remember that, John, back in the day when they just aired a bunch of 60s cartoons and they were like, this is what you'll enjoy. And you were like, yeah, sure, man. 60s and 70s.
Hanna-Barbera.
Yeah. Anywho. So, also The Rock was in The Mummy, and somehow we got back. We came full circle. So, either way, I would like to say that I love you all. Take care. And tune in next time when we talk about something completely different, probably Star Trek related, for Star Trek Thursday. So, John, say goodbye, John.
I just want to eat.
Goodbye, everybody.